Hi, Katia Woods with the Philadelphia Tribune. Hi, nice to see you guys again. I am happy to say you have one of my favorite couples on there, the anchors, and she's Afro-Latina and he's American Black.
Yeah.
Which last time we talked about was something that is very common in our community as my husband and I. And one of the things that I love that she discussed is him not having learned Spanish. And I'll talk a little bit about that because I have the same conflict with my husband. I'm like, when are you going to learn Portuguese, friend? It's been a lot of years. So talk about that aspect, language and culture, and some of these relationships as we're defining Blackness as a global thing in marriage.
Yeah. So, what's interesting is that they did not bring that specifically up to us. I mean, I know because I also follow them, but we did talk about, what sort of culture clashes there have been, or, if that was even an issue for them. And she actually commended him for, I don't want to mispronounce nothing, but there were some dances that he learned for their wedding. So, Robert, we gotta keep working on our friend, Berto, as she says. But I think that their story overall, is certainly more about how similar they are, right? And how much their relationship isn't defined by the differences, but how they do really learn from each other. So she didn't spend any time on the lack of Spanish knowledge.
And I do also think, what is your takeaway? Because I always say, as someone that's been married like a long time, almost 30 years, I'm always very hesitant to give advice on marriage, right? Because I'm like, what works for us may not work for you. So what is one takeaway that you've learned through the series universally, whether it's a communication tip or, hey, beware, usually around this year, right? It gets a little rough and you got to kind of readjust.
I think it all comes down to the individual or to a particular couple where there's likely something that you will gravitate toward. And there are plenty of things that you may be like, not for me, but I think it's fine. And that's one of the reasons why our seasons are several couples. And so there'll be 20 couples or so who all have different journeys, who all have different ways of operating. And you may see yourself in 20 of them, or you may see yourself in one of them, or you may see yourself in 3 of them. But it's about finding those things that are helpful for you as an individual or you as a couple, and then ideally talking about it, because now you've got a little more language to be able to discuss those things in particular. And so like you, I don't think it's one thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, to use your words, right? What works for us may not work for someone else. And our goal was to provide a plethora of examples and tools so that you can take and choose what works for you.
Yep.
And what else? I mean, I think we don't talk enough about that Black people are getting married, staying married. I don't think we talk enough as a community about that. We tend to talk about relationships where people are together if they have kids and a plethora of other things. Are you finding that this series is moving that conversation forward? Because I think that's one of the greatest gifts that you've given folks is, because I'm always like, in my friends group, in my lifespan, and I'm 50 plus, 1 out of 10 people in my circle is not only married, but married to a Black spouse, but been married for more than a minute. And I feel like that's really important to talk about.
Yeah.
Not that we shouldn't talk about the other, but I don't think we get enough balance. So you feel like you've helped move that conversation forward.
I would actually ask you, because I think we have a certain perspective because we hear things, but I'd be much more curious if you think that's the case.
I think so, because this idea, I think you are helping move a conversation forward. Number one, that there isn't love for people after 35, which we need to kill that. because that's foolery.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, that Black men aren't marrying Black women. And I'm not saying anything is wrong with interracial marriages, but the majority of your couples are Black people married to each other. Mm-hmm. And number three, I would say the average couple on your show is at least 5 years, like the minimum, right? It's like in between. Yeah. So I think you are. And I think that's really important for younger people. I have a daughter who'll be 21. That's something she aspires to someday get married and have her own family. And I think, yeah, I very much so. I think we're having the conversation more in a positive and healthy way. And I think that's a good thing. In whatever way that comes out in the gumbo, so to say, whether you have kids or whether you're just with each other, or maybe this is a second marriage, you're getting married later in life. But I definitely do believe that you're helping move the conversation forward.
Thank you. Yeah, that was definitely the goal. That was probably the main goal, was that we were seeing all of the negative stuff. And that's what we were talking about. That's what we were focusing on. That's what we were internalizing. We as Black people, I would say Black women, for me, because I was single when the idea came up. And so the goal was to change the conversation to the best of our ability, or at least to contribute to the conversation so that we could help shift it.
And I also like that you talked about within your guys' relationship that you pursued him a little bit. I think that's, you know what I mean? That you know what I mean? And I think that's fine too. That I don't think that makes you not feminine or whatever. Because, at the back of the look how it's worked out for you.
And a show and a company. That's what it makes her.
I think that's encouraging for women too, because that is one thing as women that I think there'll be somebody we like, whether it's at work, our neighbor, whatever. We'll spend years longing at that person silently. Yep. Oh, I like him. If we would just be like, you want to have lunch? Knock on the door, and a neighbor. I made some muffins. You want to have coffee? You never know how it work out, because we've been taught to kind of like wait for someone to come. And meanwhile, the person is in the cubicle next to you and we're not. So I
And not just that, we learned very quickly when we were shooting, I won't even just say season 1, because we shot like 50, 60 interviews, before we actually completed season 1. We learned that women that we were interviewing, couples that we were interviewing, either the woman pursued or spoke first, or in the course of the relationship, 6 months or a year max, she was like, so what are we doing? Vanessa Bell Calloway stands out to me because that was something that she said to her husband after 6 months. She was like, look, I'm trying to get married. And if that's not something that you want, cool, let me know now. But in a year, I don't want you to be questioning this and feeling like, you love me, but you're not ready for that, because I am ready for that. And so I feel like I learned very quickly in the beginnings of our interviews that was happening, that we probably weren't talking about that enough, and that it could be very empowering to women to hear other women say, I set some boundaries and I wasn't going to accept anything less than what I wanted. And if he didn't want that, he could go. I'm not forcing him to just be with me. I'm just letting him know that I'm not going to be sitting here twiddling my thumbs as a girlfriend. That's Vanessa.
No, I think that's important, because my husband and I worked together 4 years, right? We met in college, and I was like, let us be in the adult world. And I kind of like year 3. Yeah. I kind of very straightforward said, I do not want to be the professional girlfriend. If not right now, but if we are not moving towards family, then God bless. I need to jump off before it gets really hurtful. Do you think I think that's something else that women are getting better at? Not saying, hey, you have to get married or I think, but if that's not putting your intentions out is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And I think we need to talk about it more. And again, to release that stigma that still exists of like, oh, you forced it, or, because whether it's 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, it's those two people. That's all that matters, is what those two people are comfortable with. And we, I don't want to say we like you and me, but other people spend a lot of time judging how much time did y'all date. It's between those two people, but women should feel comfortable to say, this is what I want out of this. And if you don't want the same thing, then we're not on the same path.
And what have you learned? Like, I know becoming parents, right? We all look at each other and we're like, I picked a really good person. I really picked a person I have fun with. And in the back of your mind, you like, I pray they turn out to be a good parent. Like, don't let it get messy once we become parents. But I find that, especially men with daughters, it's such a beautiful thing to see us grow in that way. Talk about that. How has becoming parents changed your relationship, how you view each other? Because you guys also work together, you know?
I wish we had a daughter because I recognize the potential impact that can have. We have 3 boys. And so it's changed so much. It's changed so much, even immediately, like logistically, as well as recognizing the seasons that each of us is experiencing that may not be the same, right? And so it was, and we had kids very quickly. We had our first one year into marriage, and then we had twins 2 years after that. So for us, it was I've talked about this before, but it was like a blurry time, kind of looking up after the 3 and being like, oh, we did so much so fast. So to me, after our twins was like the beginning of our relationship in some ways. So becoming parents jump-started our relationship, because the other thing is we got engaged after 6 months. Engaged after 6 months, married a year later, pregnant a year after that. So for me, becoming parents required like a new view on things. So I don't know about you.
That's good.
He said
he's hard. He's like, I'm going to let her take that one. But no, guys, I think congratulations on this series. I'm not going to push another kid on you. If it's in God's will, then it will happen. And maybe a little girl, because, you know, you'll get a little partner in crime.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely think what you've done is incredible. And I think it's been really amazing for the culture and may it open up the dialogue even more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.